Chapter 14. When the people of Tenochtitlan drove away the white soldiers and the tribes that had helped them, they returned to their homes to celebrate their deliverance. Several of the enemy had been captured. They were offered in tribute to Huitzilopochtli almost immediately. Huitzilopochtli had resumed her story. Father Benito, increasingly less intimidated by the mention of that god, put aside Father Anselmo's warning against its mention. He justified this by reminding himself that this information was already widely known in Spain and hardly considered heresy. The priest remembered that it had been Cortés himself who had conveyed the horror felt by him and the soldiers who had survived that ordeal, when they actually had seen their comrades being sacrificed. "But you've only mentioned those days in passing. Don't you have any recollections of it?" "Yes, I remember as if it had happened yesterday. When the Mexicans saw what had become of their king, they declared a holy war against the white men. The first thing that was done was the removal of bridges inside the city, thus trapping the enemy. It all happened so fast that the snare had been laid for the Spaniards by the time I finished with Moctezuma's ashes. Several days passed, during which our people attacked the Spaniards with arrows and lances, or whatever else could do harm. The white men fought back with fire-spitting weapons, but they were overwhelmed by our numbers. Soon their allies and their animals were without fresh water or food, and eventually in the silence of night we could hear their groaning. After a while we heard even their whimpering. It took 8 days for Captain Cortés to devise a plan to escape the trap. In that time he designed a wooden bridge that would be carried by hand and used to cross the canals connecting the causeways out of the city. His men were able to construct the bridge using materials ripped out of the palaces where they were living. When they were finished, the captain gave the order to evacuate Tenochtitlan during night time. It was a rainy night, I remember. The captain's account tells that the escape took place during the last night of June. However, he isn't clear as to what went wrong. Father Benito spoke quietly as he recalled the information sent by Cortés to the King of Spain. The plan went wrong when one of our women happened to see the Spaniards sneaking out of the city. She began to shout, alerting those around her, and from there the entire city. At that moment, the sad night began for the white intruders. A woman! How ironic! Priest, don't be surprised. Mexican women were important throughout those days. We faced the ordeal in equal measure with the warriors. We were involved, many times, even during battle, and most certainly during the last siege. Father Benito reflected on what Huitzilopochtli said. It was logical that Cortés should have omitted this in his report. He had glossed over the fact that regional tribes had been crucial to his victory over the Mexicans, as he had also done regarding his own soldiers, claiming most of the credit for himself. The priest saw that the captain would not want to mention the role of native women in the event, which turned out to be his greatest humiliation. "Then what happened, Señora?" "Hari! Hari!" Without warning, Huitzilopochtli let out the Mexican war whoop. Her voice was so loud and shrill that it startled Father Benito, making him arm jerk, nearly toppling the inkpot. He looked at her, amazed that she had such power in her lungs. Then he looked around, wondering why no one in the convent had come to see what was happening. The call to war and to what our people had been awaiting was sounded, and all of us, men, women, and even children, rose in jubilation, knowing that since it was decreed that we were to be the last of our nation, then at least it would be our joy to be the ones to plunge our knives into those pale breasts. Ours would be the honor to offer their hearts to Huitzilopochtli. Benito's eyes narrowed in disbelief. He looked at Huitzilopochtli and saw a frail old woman who was admitting her part in the sacrifice of his countrymen. When she saw the look of horror on his face, she changed. "I've shocked you again. I'll go on, but I'll mention only those details that caused the Spaniards to be killed or cast out of our city. Nothing more." As they were attempting to leave, it began to rain heavily. Their vision was impeded. They slipped and fell under their four-legged beasts. Sheets of water poured down on them. In the darkness, those crawling, creeping men looked like squirming worms. Amid the booming of the snake drum, the din and clash of metal wood, the screeching of animals, our warriors rushed the escaping horde from behind, as well as from the lake. where countless canoes stabbed their flanks. All the while the Spaniards were pounded by arrows and lances. We women took places on rooftops, casting stones and pointed objects on their heads. All the while we whooped and screamed like devils, knowing that the pandemonium would increase their fear. Cortez and his captains were able to cross the causeways leading to the edge of the lake, but since they had only one bridge for the entire army, our warriors did not give them time to cross. The trap closed. When Captain Cortez turned to look back, he saw a snarl of armor, horses, and lances. He saw men jumping one on top of the other, trying to make their way across the bridge. He saw many of them fall into the lake and sink like floundering turtles dragged down by the weight of stolen treasure. He saw Captain Alvarado sink his lance into a dead body, bracing himself forward to safety. He saw his concubine rushing over human limbs, stepping on heads and shoulders so that she could live. Then it suddenly ended. Father Benito shook his head from side to side. One account says that when the captain turned back and saw what you have described, he broke down and wept like a child. The tree under which he cried is still there. It was among the first things that I was shown when I arrived. I'm sure you were shown a tree, but I doubt that the captain wept. You doubt it? Why? Because jackals do not cry.